Welcome, everyone. This is Juan Soto, Chapter President at Access with SQL Server. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I introduce my guest, I want to give you some news as to what's happening here in the next few months. March is the MVP Summit in Redmond, Washington, where I'll be joining with the Access team. This is my granddaughter, Eloisa. I'm at Ohio State. And
Hey,
yeah,
Luisa.
and Lisa, say hi. And I'll be learning the latest news from the Access team, as well as I'll be presenting an Access Day, which if you're in the Seattle area, please come on, join us. Love to have you. My topic is going to be on AI and Access. Speaking of AI and Access, you want to join us next month in April because we're going to start a 3-month series of turbocharging Access with AI, where you're going to learn how to use AI to work with Access, integrate with GitHub. Lots of changing things happening in the last weeks alone. I've seen some amazing stuff surface, and we'll be discussing all of it starting in April. So make sure you join us for this. All right. So I am recording. If you don't want to record, as always, you can always drop off and watch it on the YouTube later. And my next guest is Roy Kim. Roy, welcome. Good evening. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
So Roy is an MVP. He has been MVP since 2017. His focus is on Azure AI, and he does a lot of work with Azure Kubernetes, generative AI, DevOps. So if you're like to throw him a difficult Azure question, I'm sure he won't mind. Roy and I worked on an amazing project last year. He helped one of my clients, the largest tape manufacturing company in the world, where he set up an entire infrastructure worldwide to receive data from machines working in factories around the world. And what was funny about that is when they reached out to Roy and me, they wanted to set up the whole thing to work immediately around the world. I'm like, why would you want to do that? You're spending all this money, right? Let's start small and do a few factories first. But they insisted, no, we want it ready to go worldwide day one, because that's what they promised her. So, it was a very interesting project, and Roy was working with the cell phone modems and setting up the Azure infrastructure and setting up the control, the dashboard. So really interesting product. That's called, there's a specific name, IoT, right? Internet of Things. And so we had a great interesting. So Roy, take it away, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. Okay, so let me share my screen here. Okay, you guys can see that? Okay, cool. So the title of this talk is, chatting against private documents using KAITO RAG engine on Azure Kubernetes, right? So don't get hung up on the technology here, but I know this is like access and data, but don't worry, I'll kind of hear more about the capabilities and functionalities on chatting on private documents with AI. Okay, so but yeah, check out my blog, roykin.ca, my YouTube channel, some really good stuff, and my GitHub as well. I'm pushing a lot of this demo there as well. Okay, cool. So moving forward, feel free to stop me, any questions. Let's allow me to clarify anything. This meeting is for you guys, right? Okay, so a general problem statement we have is that organizations store vast amounts of private documents, right? And they come as policies, manuals, contracts, reports. You name it, you have it, right? Now the question is, how do we ask questions, natural language questions on those documents, right? Because conventional search, right, let's say SharePoint search, whatever, they're all very, very much based on keywords. It's hard to get, extract insights. Searching takes a lot of manual effort. Trying to search and then research and then search again on different terms and keywords, right? So, but then how do we search with more generative AI, like language models, right, that match on semantic meaning? Okay, so I'll get onto that more. And the other key problem statement that a corporation can have is that those documents contain highly sensitive information. Okay, so where do we store this information so that we can have a kind of an AI search capability, right? So this talk is sent around, or the demo sent around using Azure Kubernetes, and there's a component or a software component or what do you call an operator called KAITO, which is Kubernetes AI Toolchain Operator. So I'm not going to get too hung up on this because I know this is more of an access group, but I'll talk more about the capability, the high level capabilities. Okay, so the goal is, how do we ask questions using natural language and with language models to get answers that language models not aware of, right? So the other problem is that you can choose, the best frontier models right now, like Claude Opus 4.6 right now, GPT 5.4. But as you know, you can ask, general knowledge, right? That's been scraped, that's public out there. But what about data that's, within private documents, right? Or think of it this way: let's say you have your own personal data, right? Let's say your own tax documents, let's say your own health information, like lab test reports, what have you, right? And you're kind of hesitant to, or customer data, and you're hesitant to store it in, let's say, using like ChatGPT, or let's say Microsoft AI Foundry, that's kind of a more of a platform as a service that, you really are very conscious, right? Or you have regulatory, requirements that, that they need to be maintained like in your own servers, or like a private cloud or a private network, right? So that's where Azure Kubernetes is an option, right? Which is a bunch of set of virtual machines that's in your private cloud. So I'm just using that as an example for this talk and this demo. Okay, so one approach these days is using RAG, right? So, which is Retrieval Augmented Generation, right? So the idea is that you have documents, okay, and they get ingested, right? So into what do you call a vector database, right? And that vector database will capture semantic meaning using an embeddings model, right? So it's another type of like large language model, let's say, which is called an embeddings model, which takes chunks of data, or parses out chunks of in your documents, and then makes like a mathematical representation, like a vector, right? And then you can also have search on. So I'll get into that in a bit, right? So RAG is one approach where you have large amounts of information, right? And also to compare and contrast. So yeah, to retrieve relevant documents from a knowledge.
Hey, Roy, real quick
Yeah,
question.
sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Is RAG, I was calling it RAG, so the right pronunciation is RAG.
RAG, same
Okay,
thing.
all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, we're
All right.
tomato, right?
Is that the same technology that Copilot uses when you ask it to search for your document information?
Yeah, it would be, right? I would say
Okay.
behind the scenes, right? It has to be, right?
Okay.
So when you upload documents into Microsoft Copilot, I played around with it. It would effectively have to ingest it into a vector database behind the scenes. So yes, yes. So
All right.
retrieval augmented generation. But a new thing that's come out is skills, right? So skills is, I'll bring this up, is that skills is just a bunch of text files which you can have some small portions of knowledge that you want it fixed and part of your chat conversation all the time. So the skills, is a set of instructions, rules, conditions, right, that you want that your chat conversation to be aware of. But the skills will take up your context window, right? So now context engineering is now a new concept now, which is gonna, getting out there and is its core concept now. But RAG is, well, what if you have, huge amounts of information that you want part of the conversation, right? So RAG is you kind of park it out, and then you get pieces and chunks of information as you kind of converse and ask. So I'll get to that in a bit. So RAG provides context to a large language model because it doesn't know of that, that information. And basically, it helps generate an accurate answer grounded in that data. So I'll get to that in a diagram more about RAG, but then a bit of a plug of KAITO or KAITO, so which is Kubernetes AI Toolchain Operator. So I won't get too much into this because I don't think this group is too concerned about it, but again, I want to demonstrate its capabilities, right? And so there are similar technologies that you can choose out there that has like a RAG engine, but again, this is one that's part of the Microsoft platform, right? So it's hosted in it's a software component that helps deliver language models. So you can have an actual language model and embeddings model right in your Kubernetes cluster or your own virtual machine, okay? And that will have to take up some very expensive GPUs to run effectively, especially when you have a lot of people. Let me get to that. So that's what KAITO is. Just think of it for now as a software plugin that will help pull in a GPU server and deploy your language model of choice, right? There's a lot of open source out there that's from Microsoft, by Meta, etc. Okay, so and also the RAG engine. So there's two pieces. So let me kind of walk you through kind of the high level arc, and then we'll go into the demo. Okay, so first of all, right here, you have your set of documents, PDFs, docs, web pages. My demo will just show text files. And then here is your Kubernetes cluster. And the software component is kind of the KAITO RAG engine that you install, you deploy, you configure. Okay, and then you have these embeddings model, which takes your chunks of information and it will turn it into a vector. And then you have this example, your 5.4 language model. It's by Microsoft. It's one of the open source ones. Again, there's a lot out there, but if you think of Claude and GPT, ChatGPT or GPT like 5.2, like those are more closed. Like you can't really, run them yourself. But actually, I think GPT has a model that is similar, but you can run inside your private, cloud infrastructure. So the first step is taking your documents. So the RAG engine ingests them, chunks them out, turns them into embeddings, which are these huge floating point numbers. Okay. And then stores those embeddings along with metadata into a vector database or a vector store. Okay, so let me pause for now. Any questions or even like, basic concepts you want me to clarify? Anybody? Yeah, we're good? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
So, okay, so
Not so much good as Don. I'm just following along. I'm just following along.
yeah.
That's fine.
But yeah, no, please stop me. This is all for you. So step number 3, we have that information. Okay, we put like tons of information to this vector database. Now we're ready to ask questions, right? So what happens is that you ask a question, okay, in a chatbot, and then the RAG engine will actually take your question, say, what is the laws for the city and state, okay? And so what happens is that question is also kind of looks up this embeddings model, and it turns it into embedding itself. Okay, so think of this long vector, like a floating point array, right? A mathematical representation, right? So and then that vector will do a search against other vectors that are in this vector store to find semantic meaning, right? So to clarify, so a basic example is, let's say you have sentences that talk about, let's say king and queen, let's say, but let's say your question is something about boy and girl, okay? And so, in traditional like text-based search, right? It wouldn't match very strongly, boy, girl versus king and queen, like those in a sentence, right? So the powerful thing about with this AI models is that the embedding service will say that, okay, semantically they are very close, okay? Boy, girl, king, queen. And so, chunks of sentences will match pretty closely on that, right? So that's the key value there, right? Or the key capability. Hopefully that clarifies a bit more, okay? So we get that strong semantic similarity search, right? So this is good with, very descriptive paragraphs and sentences, but not so much on very like technical, like what do you call it? Like very factual statements, but again, it's good with those. So then you take that, right? Does that semantic similarity search, and then it'll return chunks of relevant chunks from various documents, and it'll return that, okay? So once it's returned, it will use your language model of choice right? So my demo is 5.4 language model, okay? And then it'll go back and take your original question, right? And then it'll take those chunks of information that was from the search results, and then it'll make more of a sensible response, right? To that, right? So you still need a language model that will help take the search results. It may use some of those results or not, those chunks, and then give a a proper answer. So it's a process called grounding. Okay. So anyways, let me go to the demo. It'll clarify a lot more here.
Yeah, I think the demo will help a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let me
Because
try to
usually when I use
find.
Copilot, right, I'm looking for, okay, you show me a list of proposals for
Yeah,
3M where the cost was over $100,000, right? And I go search the
yeah.
documents I have. And
Okay.
so I'm wondering if that's the kind of questions you can ask this as well.
Yeah, exactly. So you take those, let's say your 3M documents, right? You ingest
Yeah.
them, and then you can, ask questions there. So,
Okay.
okay, so let's finally go through a demo. It'll clarify. So, first of all, I fired this up. It's Azure Kubernetes behind the scenes with the language models, and I'm gonna create an index, right? So let's see here. So I basically this whole tool I vibe coded, right? And okay, so I have this, for example, I use AI to generate a, what do you call it? A Fantasia Citizen Code. It's like, what do you call it? Like a set of laws and rules and regulations, right, for this fictitious city. Okay, so before I ingest that, let me go back to here. So this tool is kind of like my playground testing tool. So right now, what I'm doing is I'm selecting the 5.4 language model, okay? And a good way to test is who are you, right? Like so I am Phi, an AI developed by Microsoft. Okay, so I can ask what are the rules of the island of Fantasia. Okay, so this language model, yeah, it's not very powerful, but again, it's going to take a huge amount of compute to use the more powerful language models. But so right here, it goes okay, I'm gonna make it bigger, maybe. Okay, the island of Fantasia is a fictional place from the popular series of Never Ending Story. Okay, Bob. So that's the knowledge that's part of the language model. Okay, but that's not what I care about, right? So how do I present like knowledge, my own knowledge, right? The knowledge I care about. So I go to document ingestion, like this tool I built. So now I'm gonna paste, let's say Fantasia rules, let's say, and then I paste this whole document, right? So okay, let me give you guys a quick scan. So some metadata, let's say here, quick like citizen and civic duties, public order, commerce and trade, environment, dispute resolution, etc., right? So I feed it all this, right? So next I click ingested paste, ingest pasted text. Okay, that's running. And then basically, these are the chunks that have been ingested, right? So there were 5 chunks in total, okay, and etc. So I'm just quick scan of that. Okay, so now let's go to
So Roy,
here.
do you have to
Yeah.
program the Vibe interface, or is there an interface that you can use already from Microsoft?
Sorry, interface like this. Are you talking about this interface
Yeah,
or?
you know how I know how you vibe coded this, but
Yeah.
so it doesn't come with an interface. The technology itself doesn't come with its interface that you can use. You have to create your own interface.
Yeah, exactly. So this
Okay.
interface, this chatbot interface, is a pretty popular like a Python library called Streamlit, if you ever heard of it. So I use Streamlit, and then I vibe coded on top of that, right? So it's not like this user interface is not from scratch, and also the KAITO tool or software that's get deployed, it's not responsible. It has no out of the box interface at all, right? It's just an API, basically, right? Does that answer? that answer your question? Sorry, you're on mute. Sorry, Juan, you're on mute.
Yeah, that does answer. But I'm going to post a link in the comments. I use this website where I can grab parts of website code.
Okay.
Right? I'll be talking more about that then in April, but it's called 21st Dev. So go ahead with the chat, and I'll just paste it in the chat
Okay.
here so people can see
Cool.
it.
All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna ask about Fantasia, like rules, regulations, right? So now I'm gonna convert, like I was using 5.4, but now I'm gonna point this chatbot to the RAG engine, okay? And also the RAG engine has to use I'm gonna use the 5.4 mini model to help generate a proper answer back given the search results, right? So hold on, maybe I should do like new chat. I'm just pointing to the RAG engine. So let's see here. So I also built a prompt library. So Fantasia Citizen Code. So what is the Fantasia Citizen Code, right? Let's see what happens here. So the Fantasia Citizen Code is a fictional document that outlines the laws and regulations of the Fantasia Island jurisdiction, known as Fantasia, right? So yeah, it did return that. So well, actually, what was the original one? What are the rules of the island of Fantasia? I think that's the very first question.
Yeah,
This is what
it
happens here.
was.
Yeah.
So this engine you're using, running it locally. You're not running an engine in the cloud, or you are running an engine in the cloud.
It's in the Azure private cloud, right? You know what I
Okay.
mean? But it's not,
Yeah.
against like AI Foundry or like, like whatever, platform as a service, right?
Yeah, the AI Foundry itself
ChatGPT,
is pretty
yeah.
impressive. If you haven't take a look, they have so many models there, even stuff I never heard of.
Oh yeah. So I'll show you a quick demo where I'm using that heavily as well, right? But then this approach was using like Kubernetes and KAITO is even more like, what do you call it? It's in your hands more, right? Like the infrastructure, right? So if you're like, concerned about clients, about okay, where's my data going into, etc. Is it segregated? Do you have more control? So this approach helps answer those concerns, right? That's
Okay.
the point, right? So here it goes, the rules of Island of Fantasia. Actually, yeah, this is pretty cool. It did a pretty good job this time. It actually gives out like that table of contents. If you guys saw from before, right? So that was pretty cool, right? So you got that there, and let's see here. So it didn't confuse with, let's say, that novel, that we showed before, right? And it was kind of fast too, right?
Yeah.
And then we have, let's say, another question we can give. So I like to keep a prompt library, right? So if you're designing, like, let's say, a chatbot against your documents, right? Highly recommend your own kind of prompt library that you can, have a set of questions and you can always change them. So what do the citizens of Fantasia Island need to know about the laws? And then going against that. Okay, and then yeah, so citizens of Fantasia Island need to be aware of the following key points: citizenship classes, civic ledger registration, all. So this is all still coming from the original document, right? Which is,
How many documents did you upload for the demo? I'm curious.
I just did this one text file, but let
Okay.
me do another one. So
Have you seen people do, what's the limits of this technology? Because some corporations have thousands of documents, right?
Oh yeah. It can scale, right? It can scale, right? So it's very dependent on your private cloud infrastructure with Kubernetes, and you
Yeah.
can get more compute, you can get more disk, you can get more whatever, right?
Well,
So
as they add more documents, right, to the setup,
yeah,
is it easy to scale it? Because like, for example, when I create a VM in Azure, and then I
yeah.
realize I need a bigger hard drive, sometimes I have to start from scratch to create the VM. But in this case, you don't necessarily have to start from scratch with the Kubernetes, right? You can just increase the capacity.
Yeah, pretty much. There is with disk, there is always tweaks you need to do, like some scalability. So you're adding more disk and etc. Right? But you
Yeah.
can always partition it, right? So it's not like disk, right? It's not like elastic, right? Like totally
Yeah.
elastic, right? But
What kind of disk do you recommend? Do you recommend the high performance one, or do you recommend working on the slower ones as well?
Just premium SSD is fine,
Okay.
So premium is pretty good. Yeah. So, and the GPUs I'm using are fairly expensive. Like I have to cut, like I don't know, for this demo, if I'm running it 24/7 for a month, you're looking at like $1,000 or more. These are like these are the cheaper or older NVIDIA GPUs, but
Yes.
again, they're pricey, so I have to make sure I really turn them off,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. So let's do another
As
one
an
right
Azure
here.
MVP, you get a lot of credits, right? Every year they give you what,
Yeah,
$20,000 in credits?
10,000 US. Yeah, 10,000.
Okay,
Or no,
that's pretty
12,000,
good.
12,000, 12,000. Yeah. So, try to be careful there. So let's just do that. Let's do another example. So this one is, so I think a good use case is if you want to go technical is that, what are compliance requirements in an organization, right? So the security team, government, like they have their own like documentation, right? On, let's say, security controls with networking, data, etc., right? So
Yeah.
here again, this is just AI generated, and then so let me walk you through kind of this tool, document ingestion. You can upload it, paste. So cloud security SOC, right? And then they ingest, paste the text, right? So again, it was in these chunks, right? 5 chunks.
Yeah.
Okay, like resiliency, test controls, capacity, all that stuff, right? So, and then let's see here, let's see document. What can we browse? So here's the
Well, I
index.
I have I know I have a friend
Sure.
of mine. He
Yeah.
does a lot of access work, but he does fabs. Like, he does a lot of work in Taiwan with
Okay.
factories in Taiwan. And a fab factory like that is, it can be $1 billion to create. And the amount of documentation associated with the manufacturing, the equipment, the maintenance, right? You're looking at thousands and thousands of documents. And when you upload that here, is it
Yeah.
smart enough to say, find me the diagram for a pump that's doing 20 gallons per minute, right? So is it smart enough to know, all right, let me search for AutoCAD files or PDF images. Does it scan images as well?
Okay, so this one doesn't scan images, so you need to have, like, again, software or code that will take that'll take PDFs and convert them into text. So at the end of the
Oh, okay.
day, it looks at text, right?
Okay.
So yeah, you
So it's
need
not
you
going to look
need
at images and say, okay, these are the 5 pumps I found, something like that, based on the image.
not the RAG engine, right? But you can do multimodal language models that can look at images, right? But yeah, that's a good use case. I haven't really thought of that yet, but you can take images and they can be, again, turned into vectors, like those mathematical representation,
Mhm.
and put into a vector database, right? I haven't really tried it with this one. Maybe it's capable, or you have to find the right, what do you call it, embeddings model that does that. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely possible, So yeah. Okay, so here, this tool, what should I show? So the index browser is that we can look at the index, right? So here we see that we have 10 chunks, and we're across 2 files. So I did that cloud security control one and Fantasia rules. So if I click just to see under the hood what it looks like, right? So this chunk is 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 this piece right here, right? It got cut off at this point, okay? How it kind of tracks or each other is that those chunks are overlapping. So the language model kind of is smart enough, right? So that it overlaps the chunks. They're not like, it's totally, mutually exclusive chunks, right? So click on this one.
Well, give me a for instance of overlapping. What would be that be with two documents overlapping?
So, okay, yeah, for example, this document right here, right? Like we saw here, title 4. See, it still kept some things here, right? But then when it chunks again, the next piece, you know, let's say it stops here, it'll chunk a
So when you
few,
upload a
whatever sentence
document, it's
before.
splitting it into chunks, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but they're overlapping, right? They're
Oh,
overlapping.
okay.
So the
Okay.
language model is smart enough to kind of stitch it together, right?
I see.
When
Got it.
when it knows. But the key thing, it needs to chunk it out, right? So again, this is just a visualization of the chunking that happens behind the scenes, right? And the number of characters. And of course, there's control of how big each chunk is and all that stuff. And also metadata that you can assign. So I give it like for each chunk to know that they're related is that, yeah, they have the same file name, they have the same path, ingested at, like all this stuff, right? To
Yeah.
track. And also when you do searches, even though you have a query saying, you know, find me the citizen rules in your prompt, you know, you can also mention like some metadata too, right? Like, oh, based on this file or this source type, text, PDF, etc. Right? It can, these capabilities can still be extended, you know. So it has that kind of tracking. So any questions, Carl? Like anything on your mind, George?
Anybody has any questions? You guys have any questions so far?
No, it's fascinating.
Anybody?
I'm just taking it in.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's see here. If we go back to the prompt library, so if you're designing or looking at other like out of the box software, you know, it's good to have a prompt, let's say a library, right, that has, you know, a set of questions that you can edit, right, that you can add and edit. So for example, this one I just like right here, edit. See, how do I do that? Edit. Oh yeah, this one here. So FCC party. So the Fantasia, can I play loud music when it's my birthday at midnight in my backyard? So let's try this one right here. It's a special birthday. I will be having 100 friends and family to celebrate. So a little bit, you know, nuanced and such, but you know, it's good to have a library of kind of these questions, right? So you go back here, okay, and FCC party, okay, and I have my question here. I put in that as well. So the ability to play loud music at midnight, blah blah, in your backyard is part of the rule public order and community standards. Quiet lantern hours are from 21:30 to 6:30. So let's cross check that. Let's test, you know, is it really matching against the original document, right? So quiet, what was it? Lantern, is it here or, oh no, sorry, that was the wrong document. So let's see here. Quiet land. Okay, so here, yeah. So it actually matched that public order and community standards. That is coming, it, you know, reference that section, right? And also the quiet lantern hours are, you know, 21:30 to 6:30, the time daily, right? So that is also mentioned here, right? So I felt like that was a really good test because, you know, I throw in words like birthday and, you know, having 100 friends and celebrate and all that stuff, right? But I'm trying to, in a way, confuse it a bit with my question. I'm kind of, you know, make it just, you know, adding more words in there. But again, the key thing was able to match the intent, the semantic meaning from that,
Yeah, that's
right?
great. That's exactly what
Right?
you want.
Yeah,
You want to be able to
exactly.
search all these thousands of documents for the meaning, not so much the exact phrase. Because the exact
Exactly.
phrase, all you're doing is just pattern matching at that point, but the meaning is very important.
Exactly. So one thing, the con or the disadvantage was this kind of this RAG engine or semantic searches. If you have documents that are very like if you have like a CSV file, let's say, right, and you're and it has like, you know, location data product data, right? You know, a bunch of widgets, and you have a description field, price, etc. You know, whatever, right? And they're just short forms of text, but it's very well structured. So that becomes a weakness in this approach. Okay, that's where you want to use kind of different methods, because that's more like text pattern matching, etc. Right? So that's where there are strategies where you have hybrid search, where you have both the like text traditional search and the semantic search. You retrieve both.
Yeah.
You retrieve both, and then you can still have like your language model, right? That will take those search results from both the traditional and semantic, and it'll still be smart enough or intelligent enough to take your original question and kind of piece together based on those search results, right? So that's another
Nice.
strategy, right? So
So
you know,
Wendy
you
has a
want to
question for
deploy.
you.
Yeah,
Wendy's
yeah.
question is, can the
Okay.
vector database be loaded from any kind of document, say Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, or Microsoft Shop? Is the engine directed to search against documents stored in directories on cloud server, or is some migration needed before they can be coded as vectors?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, good question. So at the end of the day, the RAG engine, or the one I have, it needs to ingest as text, right? So yeah, it needs to be, the data needs to be kind of if it's a PDF, there are these popular open source projects or software. I think I forgot, it was like DocLint or Doc something that does look at PDFs and then convert them into text, right? Or Word docs, convert them into text, right? So there is some, you know, data transformation, you know, like kind of your ETL or whatever that has to happen, right? So, or there could be embedding models.
Well, I think Wendy,
Yeah.
I think Wendy's question was so much, you have to import the documents into Kubernetes. You can't just say, can you search against this directly on a network server or on a cloud, right? It's got to be imported into Kubernetes.
Well, you could write a script, right? Or even this tool that can point to a folder, right? So in my like you can drag and drop, or I can point it to, you know, let's say, like, you know, point it to a folder, right? And then just gobble it up, you know. It's possible, right? But then yeah, you have to use the right plugins and software components, right? But yeah, but it end of the day, it goes to Kubernetes or the disks behind the scenes and storage, you know. So yeah. Okay, cool. So how are we with time? So it's 8:13. Okay, so yeah, just to wrap up here. So I think document ingestion, prompt library, home, and yeah, so I have a lot of these toggles here to kind of test different scenarios. You know, again, I can even load up different language models, that because the Kubernetes cluster, you can have multiple language models, right? You can, you know, that you want to, in different kinds and flavors and all that stuff, right? That will be deployed, right? So, yep, I have a lot of these, you know, knobs and controls and all that stuff here, but I can go into that in a bit. And so if you ever, you know, if you're a coder yourself, Streamlit is a very good like chatbot UI. It's my go-to for me, right? It's based on Python. And let me give another little like a bonus demo, which to demonstrate, let's see here. So this one right here, I'm kind of like been building for myself, right? So it's another chatbot, but I use AI Foundry this time because I do want to use, let's say, like GPT chat and all that stuff, right? So I have, you know, with this chatbot UI Streamlit, you can select different agents, right? So I have the KAITO RAG assistant one right here, etc., that I point to Kubernetes, but this one, this fitness nutrition one, it's pointing to AI Foundry. This is my endpoint, my API key, and also the model and a bunch of settings. So what this
We're gonna
one
have to blur
is,
that out. We're gonna have to blur that out before you upload to YouTube. We don't
oh,
want some
what?
people copying your endpoint or key.
Oh no, it's okay. This one's fine. Well, yeah, the key is the
Okay.
one you don't want, right? So
Yeah.
it's all good. But okay, so one thing I want to little bonus demo here, right, before I close off is that this is like a fitness agent right here. So what I do is that some of this data or whatever I chat with it, I do store it into a SQL database, right? A SQL table, and I give it my, my birthday, my height, because I'm giving it like a lot of information where I live and all that stuff. I want to give it my blood pressure. And so what I want to do is I want to track kind of what I eat, right? So what I do is every like meal I have, whatever, I can kind of feed an image like on my phone. So one second here, I'm just on my other monitor. Where's a picture of, okay, here we go. Let me drag and drop. Let's see here. So this is a simple breakfast beef wrap. And in here, I want to say, let's see here. So beef wrap, and then what are the macro nutrients of this dish, right? So hopefully it reads that, right? And so it actually takes that image and it takes like calories, protein, and it actually stores it into a SQL database, okay? And what you call like long-term memory, right? So that I can, go back and ask for a report, a weekly report, daily report, and etc. Right? So let's see here. It's taking a while. But while it does that, I kind of did that already. Like, so let me just show you kind of a past one here. I asked, who are you? I'm ChatGPT, and in this, I'm acting as your personal fitness, nutrition, health assistant, right? So this is like, it's already part of my context, right? Like this chatbot, I've already put it into like a system prompt to say like, what's your job, like what's your purpose, right? So that's what I like to do. That's a little technique I do. So estimate calories, etc. Also kind of fitness coach, right? And so at this point, I inputted a meal, like the same one, and it'll show 1 medium flour tortilla, 2 scrambled eggs, cooked beef, etc., calories, protein, carbohydrates, fat, fiber, right? And behind the scenes, I tell it to store this information into a table. Okay, so I actually have defined columns for that, right? So, and I also, in a past conversation, I put like a fitness goal. I want to lose 10 pounds, right? And and then it will say about 1/3 of your daily calories is 1,800 calories. This is 25 to 30% of your daily protein target, etc. Right? So, again, I just keep feeding it, and basically it knows more about me, my history. And so this is kind of where a true agent, what you want as a true agent, okay, is to keep storing your conversations and also parse out specific factual information that you want to reference in the future, right? So this is what we want. Okay, we don't want your typical chat GPT that has a short life cycle, although right now it is recording conversations and it's kind of bringing it back. I've noticed that nowadays it's being built in. But again, it's my true fitness assistant, right? And I can ask, okay, so given all this information, right now, provide me a plan to lose another 20 pounds in 2 months, right? So again, behind the scenes, there is logic, there is like skills, there is influencing that like every chat or question will basically say, look, cross-check against my Azure SQL database, okay, with all that information, right? And then, give it some time, it's doing that. I also have a table that will have unstructured data, right? Such as like your ad hoc data. Like I'm gonna give it like a past blood test report, or like let's say my cholesterol, because actually last year I had quite a bit of high cholesterol, and so I've been using like these AI tools to really understand cholesterol management and all that stuff. And so given that, like again, the more it knows about my patterns, right, and about my health information, right, my weight, my height, my waist size. I say because each time I go to ChatGPT, like last year, I always like put in my age. Like every time I do another thread of conversation, right? So now I don't need to do that. Like it already knows about me, right? So I need it. Okay, so finally, here's the end. I need to be
Plus, the
straight
data
responsible
is
with you.
secured in your private cloud, right? You're not sharing the
Yeah.
data with them.
Well, this one is an AI. Yeah. So the data is going through AI Foundry, I guess, but yeah, the factual data, I have it in my Azure SQL database, right? So yeah, losing 20 pounds, it's basically saying it's aggressive, it's not safe or sustainable. So that's good. I like that feedback, right? I like that feedback, right? And what can I give you? The fastest, safest plan, etc. So it's what kind of training, etc. So basically, the more pattern information I give it, right, the more like valuable it is, right? It's a true agentic assistant, right? So anyways, so I'll leave it at that. I think you guys get it, right? And then I create a panel on the right, that keeps track of like kind of like my profile information. Like, I'm gonna keep,
And all this was
having more
vibe coded,
features.
right, Roy?
Yeah, but I leverage software like software libraries like the Chat UI, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, okay, this is the thing with vibe coding, right? Is that I really try to understand the software frameworks. I'm using Microsoft Agent Framework to help orchestrate between MCP server, between saving it to a database, managing short-term, long-term memory. Like I really have to read all that documentation, and so that you want to get away from AI slop, right? So you really want to have the code that's generated aligned to like a proper engineering, right? Like software engineering, like that's key. Like I've gone into the trap where it was really slop, it was getting confused, errors, hard to debug, or it was just a sloppy layer on top of sloppy layer. So you got to like step back, use frameworks, use the right terminology, right, in those software components, right, like agent, long-term memory, context provider, all you need to do that. So that's the proper way of vibe coding.
Well, we
So
could
anyways,
probably spend a whole night just on that, but we have
yeah,
George has a comment here. George has
okay.
got 10 years of nutrition, weight, height data, and he's assuming he can be imported into an agent file like this to establish a profile from history, right? So anybody can do this, right?
Sorry, restate the question? Like anybody can, yeah.
George's got 10 years of data, right, regarding his
Okay,
data, his
yeah,
nutrition, weight, height, and medical results.
right.
So anybody can take that data and upload to a solution like you created to do analysis, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So what I would do if I was George, I had that information. You don't want to just throw it in there, right? You look at your data, and then you come up with a table design. So that's what I had to do. Like I would say, okay, create this SQL table, have these columns, and also ask the AI like, what do you recommend? Give me some options. So if you have very structured, semi-structured, place it there, and also data that you want to keep appending, right? Like rule, appending, and then put that down. And then on top of that, it's set up in a way that you can ask or prompt your data properly, right? So that's the approach. But yeah, definitely you can do it, but don't just throw it in there,
He says he's got
yeah.
it in Azure now, so it's just a quick step from there to create the program. Thank you, George, for
Right,
your
right.
comments. Appreciate that.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Thank
Well,
you,
look, we're
George.
gonna open
Okay,
up.
cool. Yep.
We're gonna open
Yep.
up for comments, questions. You guys have any questions for Roy as we wrap up the meeting?
Yeah.
I had one.
Sure.
At the beginning, you showed a diagram with all kinds of components that were kind of hooked together, and I'm wondering if
Yeah.
if there's sort of a set configuration of those things, or if it's pretty much mix and match, like you could do it in different formats. Because what I'm thinking about is like I'm surprised to see Kubernetes kind of in the center of this, because that's like seems to me like one method of processing power. If you wanted to do this, for example, all on your notebook and use the processing power of just your notebook, could you plug some of these components into that processor, or is it pretty much designed?
Okay.
Is it pretty much
Yeah.
designed to work a certain way, like with Kubernetes?
Yeah, it's intended strongly for Kubernetes, right? Yeah, you cannot take it to like a vanilla virtual machine or a notebook, like you say. Yeah, it's very tailored for that. But Kubernetes is a very like we call it. It is a very popular, highly adopted in the enterprise space, right? As a compute cluster, right? A compute or application hosting or data processing, let's say, compute layer, right? And then this KAITO engine it's meant to be pretty much off the shelf. There are some configuration settings and all that stuff, but it does a lot of plumbing behind the scenes for you, like getting you your GPU node pools, like that's a big deal, right? And the permissions and internally and all that stuff, grabbing the language model from like a what do you call like a repo or a container or like a Docker container registry or something like that, right? Like it pulls it in together. So it does a lot of heavy lifting for you, but yeah, unfortunately, it's for Kubernetes. But
What the K
I'm
is?
sure. Sorry,
Is that
yeah.
what the K? That's what the K is in KAITO? Is Kubernetes?
Yeah, because it stands for Kubernetes AI Toolchain Operator, right? But there are like, I'm sure there's other RAG engines or components that say for notebook, for this, for that. I'm sure there's very similar solutions out there, right? That achieves the same capability.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
cool.
Carl.
Any other?
Anybody else has any questions before we go? All right. Well, look, thank you, Ray. Great job. If you like what you heard today, please come join Roy at the LinkedIn and comment on the post that we have, social posts, so people know that they missed a great presentation. Thank you, my friend, for a job well done. I'll be in touch for the Microsoft Summit. Please, a reminder to join us next month in April. We're going to be doing Access with AI. Thank you very much for everybody to join us. We'll see you next month in April, the second Tuesday in April. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Roy.
everyone. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.